good. So I came here early to check out the roads. The roads weren't very good. It was snowing way harder than they said it was going to snow. And then I met Elmo here and we chatted, and then we decided, you know, it's best that safest to cancel church. So I canceled church, texted, anybody show up? Oh, one person. So that's not good. So we canceled church, and then I went home, and I have. How many have a special spot where you sit when you're home? Well, I have a special spot. So I sat in my spot. You know, it was my plan to sit there and just feel bad about myself for a while. You know, I had big plans for the day, and so I sat there, and then I kept looking outside, and it was like, I don't know, by that time it was like maybe 8:30, and then it just stopped snowing, and then that made me angry, and then then the sun came out, and I'm like, that made me angrier. And then probably around, I don't know what time, but maybe like around 9 o'clock or so, and I never do this, I just stood up and I said, I'm out of here. And Penny was like, this is going to be a bad day. I could just see it. And I just went to bed. I never go have a nap. I said, I'm going to bed. So I went to bed. And I went to bed, I had a nap. I got up, I don't know what time I got up the next day. No, just kidding. It wasn't that bad, I'm just kidding. So I got up, and I came out, and it was like snowing really bad. And later in the day, a friend of mine from Ontario, I was talking on the phone, and he was like, oh, I see that you had to cancel church, and well, Penny, and I was like, yeah, and I started to tell him the story about how I was so depressed, and Penny's like, oh, by the way, it started snowing really hard around like 9:30, 10 o'clock, so I took video to make you feel better. And I'm thinking, that's ridiculous, that's not going to make me feel better. Then she showed me the video, I'm like, this day's amazing. It just shows how weird we are. And so she showed me the video, then I felt great, and I'm like, oh, I made the right decision. And it was good. That's a little glimpse inside of it. It's a scary spot in there. But just before we start, this is our last week that we were working our way through the series called Prodigal God. And for me, I will say that this series for me, I know I've had other people talk to me, but for me, has been absolutely life-shaping for me. Has really done something for me in my own heart. But first of all, I want to say how proud I am of you all. I know that a shift like we've done over the last month where we gather around tables, I know that sometimes it can be hard to do something like that. But I just want to say a couple things about that. I want you to know something. This is important for me to tell you. That we don't just make change for the sake of change. We change because we made this change in particular to go around tables for a month. In particular because we actually need more community in our lives. We actually need more time around tables than we do sitting in rows. And so that was one reason why we made that shift. I know that change is hard, but we need to understand that change is really important. And so I want you to know that as we continue to change, I want you to know that as we change, we don't change just for the sake of changing. There's a saying that says this, and we heard it from Paul Borden a few years ago. The gospel never changes, but the church must constantly be changing. The gospel never changes. The message of the gospel never changes, but how it's presented, how we receive it, how we sit, must constantly be changing. If you ask someone who's younger than you, I'm 45. A few weeks ago I said, you know, I'm 46 years old, and someone after church said, you know, you're 45. And I felt a lot better. And so I'm 45, and change is hard for all of us. But if you go find someone who's younger than you, a youth or a young adult, and you ask them about what are they looking for, they're going to tell you that they're looking for community, for gathering, for learning together, not just to be talked to. So I thank you for your patience as we change together, and you should probably know that won't be the last time that we do church around tables. But beginning today, we're going to be ending this series together. And actually last week, I thought last week was like, for me, was going to be my favorite message in the whole series. And it really was a moment for me. But just like any parable that Jesus would tell it in the New Testament while he was teaching, we need to figure out who we are in the story. And that's why Jesus told parables. That's why there was numerous characters in many parables, so that people could figure out who they were in the story. Or at least, who do I relate to the most? We need to listen to the Spirit of God as we read through the parables, as we read through the stories that Jesus tells, and think, okay, who do I relate to? Who speaks to me from this story? Because that's the idea of why they were written that way. So today we're going to do a bit of a quick review, and then we're going to end on something that I hope will challenge your heart in a way that it's never have been before. So today we're going to be talking about the prodigal God. So we're just going to do some quick review. The lost sheep. It speaks of our nature, and the shepherd would go out and look for the lost sheep. It's the parables right before the prodigal son. Then there's the parable of the lost coin. And a lady has 10 coins and she's in her house. And these coins were more than just coins that she would use to spend and to buy things. These were coins that were connected to her wedding, to her dress. They were very, very, very valuable. And she loses a coin, and she actually turns the house upside down looking for that coin. And that speaks towards our value. And the church should constantly be looking for people who have lost their way. Then the story of the lost son. And the lost son, no one goes to look for the lost son. It's the lost sheep, somebody goes. The lost coin, somebody goes. And then all of a sudden there's a story of the lost son, and nobody goes. And this speaks to our heart, because we all have in our heart things that aren't good. Luke 15, 1-2. Now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So the first group of people that we're introduced to in the story is the religious people, the Pharisees. They didn't like Jesus sitting with the sinners, with the tax collectors. This man sits with sinners and tax collectors. You can actually feel, off just those few words, you can actually feel the disdain. You can actually feel that. These folks, they kept the law. So one of the laws was, back in the Old Testament, was you couldn't walk farther than a stone's throw on the Sabbath. And this was so people would rest. And so if you could throw a stone 200 feet, that's as far as you could walk. But a Pharisee would find a way to get around the law. So what they would do is they would fill their pockets with stones. And they would throw the stone, walk to the stone. Throw the stone, walk to the stone. Throw the stone, walk to the stone. And so they didn't understand that the laws were there to help them or protect them. And they just found a way. One of the laws was that they couldn't have any pigs on their land. So what they would do is they would build a platform like this platform, and they would put the pigs on the platform, so that technically the pigs weren't on the land. See, they kept all the rules, but they didn't really understand the spirit and the heart behind them. Rules. And we need to be very careful that we don't become so religious, because the truth is their intentions started good, but over time their intentions moved and they became prideful. And many times people who become religious become prideful. They call it self-righteous. They were proud that they kept the rules. They were proud that they didn't associate with those people. Don Cherry got fired for saying that. They were proud of that. They missed the spirit of what Jesus was living in front of them. Because even Jesus broke the rules. See, they're all just coming out of this Old Testament mentality. And Jesus was always redefining what sin was. He was always redefining what was happening. You look at the lady who was caught in adultery. All the people gathered around her. They picked up stones and they were going to stone her. According to the law, they were doing what the law said to do. And Jesus says, whoa. Those of you who are here without sin, why don't you throw the first stone? And everybody drops the stones and runs away. See, Jesus was redefining what was happening. I mean, there was rules. But Jesus was always showing us what the real heart behind those rules were. We need to become careful, be careful, not to become so wrapped up in the rules, but we forget about what a relationship with Jesus is really about. So that's the Pharisees. Then we have the younger brother. This is the most popular person in the whole story. Actually, the whole story is named after him, the prodigal son. It says this in Luke 15, 11 to 24. And Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my estate. So he divided his property between them. Now remember, he would have had to sell the property. It wasn't just he would take out his wallet and write a check for 1/3. He had to divide the property. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and he set off to a distant country. And he squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country. Just a quick note. God was already pursuing him. And many scholars believe that that famine was all about bringing that boy home. God will knock you on your donkey to get your attention. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself as a citizen of the country. He went to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, best line, he said, how many of the father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. See, the younger son had something in his heart. He wanted the father's things, but he didn't want the father. So he asked the father, I want my inheritance, which was 1/3 of all of his property. So the father sells everything, gives him 1/3. This was only supposed to happen after the father died. He would get 1/3, his brother would get 2/3. What he was saying was, you're not dead, but I wish you were. This brought shame to the father, shame to the family, shame to the community. This came at incredible cost to the father. He had to sell and divide his land, great financial loss. And the truth is, in that culture, the father would have been totally justified to run the boy away, take him out of the inheritance and give him nothing. He introduces this idea to the story of disordered love, because he loved things more than he loved the Father. And we know that as idol worship. Not necessarily worshiping a statue, but worshiping anything more than we worship God. This is the state of lostness that we all understand. It's about turning good into the ultimate. We're turning some things that are not bad, but making them the most important thing. We see this all around us. And the truth is, if I took a survey before this series, everybody, almost everyone would agree that this is the most common form of lostness. Maybe that might be you today. That you've wandered away, you've squandered all you've had, you've wasted all you've had. But most likely it could be you or maybe somebody you know. We don't know how close he was ever to the Father. But either way, he took everything he had and he ran away. He ends up in a pigsty, hungry, or surrounded by things that are edible but are not food. I can't imagine how he felt in this moment. I mean, I don't know about you, but some people in our household, they have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. I'm not going to say anyone, but there's people, more than one. But he had to come to this realization that he'd been wrong, that he made a mistake, that he had been a fool, that he was alone. Those that are around him are not family. He would feel unvalued, and he wanted to be with his Father. Have you ever been homesick? And we wouldn't admit it now, as an adult, but as a kid, I can remember being away from my parents and just feeling like I need to go home. And I think what we need to understand is God is pursuing the Pharisee in all of us, and he's pursuing the younger son in all of us. Third person in the story is the Father. We pick him up in verse 18. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, this is the younger brother, Father, I've sinned against you, against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. And he said to the father, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. But the father said to the servants, quick, bring the robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead, but now he's alive. He was lost, but now he's found. It's so amazing where it says, while the boy was still a long way off. See, the father already had forgiveness in his heart. He didn't know what the boy was going to ask if the boy was just coming home because he needed more money. But forgiveness is aggressive. It gets off the porch. Forgiveness is absorbing the debt. We've got to remember this as we move forward in the story. Forgiveness is taking the debt on for yourself. And forgiveness has to be powered from the inside. The Father had compassion on him. And this is where we start to see God as the prodigal. He's the one that is spending recklessly, being extravagant. And many would say that he was being wasteful. Because his grace and his mercy is being given to us even when we've wandered away. The fourth person we see is the older brother. Now I understand this part of the story is difficult for us. And it's difficult for many reasons. It's difficult because we don't know the culture as well back then. It's difficult because we don't want to believe that the older brother was lost, but yet he was still obedient. And it becomes challenging, and I understand that. It says this in verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what's going on. Your brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf and has him back safe and sound. And the older brother's heart begins to be revealed in the story. The older brother became angry and he refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when that son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said. Just think of how gentle the father is with him. He says, my son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and alive again. See, he's angry. He would not come into the celebration. So the father went out to get him, just like he met the boy in the driveway. He says, you killed the most fattened calf for him, and I couldn't even get a goat. He's revealing this anger that's in his heart. And now he's revealing his longing for the Father's things and not the Father. Then bitterness is revealed. This son of yours. It's almost like he's trying to disassociate himself from the brother. Oh, this son of yours. Parents do this all the time. Kids do something great, they're like, my son is amazing. They do something bad, and they're like, that son of yours. Just so we know it's the mother's or the father's fault. Last thing, we mentioned a few things about the older brother. This is hard, but neither brother cared for the father's heart. But the father loved both brothers. And the older brother's lostness is really hard to recognize because he's always been home. And the truth is, elder brothers are harder to reach. Symptoms that of the other older brother in us. We serve God for what we can get from him. God, if you'll do this for me, then I'll. If you would have given me a goat, then. God, if you will answer this prayer, I will stop doing. Elder brothers, service to the Father becomes a duty, not a privilege. That is church people in a nutshell. Where we say, I'm going to go to, like you guys are all here. You all lost an hour's sleep. You all drug your sorry selves out of bed an hour early. And some of you, you're like, I'm only here because she brought me. Or he brought me. Or, in your guys' case, they brought me. Because it's become a drudgery. Serving him has become, I have to serve him. No. I get to serve him. I gotta be here at 8:30 to play on a worship team after we practiced on Tuesday already, actually for 2 weeks because last week got canceled. I get to serve him. I gotta be in the nursery. Troy's such a good speaker. I hate to miss his sermon. Okay, no one ever says that, but still. I have to be in the... No, you don't have to. You get to. Amen. I gotta serve coffee. No, you don't have to. You get to. Amen. I gotta open the door. What's wrong with people? Can't they open their own door? You don't have to. You get to. And serving Jesus isn't a drudgery. But for the brother, it became a drudgery to serve the Father. Elder brothers, pray. I know this story is hard for us, thinking and believing that both brothers were lost. But just bear with me for the last part today. How many in this room have an older brother? Or you are an older brother? I mean, I know what it's like. You have older brothers, and sometimes they're older than you, and they pick on you, and they tease you. But older brothers, they have a job. And that job is to protect the younger people in the family. I mean, that's what an older brother should be like. Watching out for you, protecting you. There for you even when you're in trouble. Remember, it was a parable of 3 types of lostness. The lost sheep. The shepherd goes out. He puts the sheep on his shoulders and he carries them home. The lost coin. The lady tears her house apart until she finds the coin. and then the parable of the lost son. There's the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. The son gets inheritance, he goes into the world, but he becomes totally lost, and nobody goes to look for him. I mean, I think not the average person would know this, and I get that, but why did Jesus tell 3 stories about lost things in a row? At this time, they were dealing with oral traditions, spoken traditions. This is hard for us to understand, but they did not believe that 2,020 years later, we would be reading the Bible. He was just speaking to them. And he does something in this story that is absolutely life-changing. When he tells 3 stories, here's the reason. To set a pattern. Hey, listen, there's a lost sheep. Someone goes and looks for them. There's a lost coin, and someone goes. And the 3rd story breaks the pattern. There's a lost sheep. Someone goes. There's a lost coin. Someone goes. But then there's a lost son, and nobody goes. 2 set the pattern, and the 3rd breaks the pattern. And everybody, all the Pharisees, all the family, all the disciples, all the people would have known that Jesus is trying to tell them something. He spoke in 3. 2 to set the pattern, 1 to break the pattern. Someone looks for the sheep, someone looks for the coin, but no one looks for the brother. He was drawing everyone's attention in that culture to something that is missing in the story. And everybody would have known. We don't know because we don't understand the culture or the context. But everybody in that story would have said, this does not make sense because somebody always finds lost things. 2 to set the pattern, 1 to break the pattern. The fact that no one went to look for the younger brother would have stood out to them. They would have said, what is going on here? See, he was lost. He was relationally lost. He was separated from his family. He was socially lost. He left his country and lost all his friends. He was morally lost. He was involved with prostitutes. He was religiously lost because he was eating with pigs. He was financially lost because he was broke. He was emotionally lost because he was willing to eat pig food. He was physically lost because he was starving. He was lost, 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 lost. And when Jesus would have told this story, people would have thought, one of these things is not like the other. Something doesn't make sense. Someone looks for the sheep, somebody looks for the coin, but no one looks for the boy. It's the absence of something in the story that would have stirred the hearts of every single person listening. When the sheep wanders, the shepherd goes. When the coin is lost, the woman goes. When the son is lost, nobody goes. This contrast would have been striking to them. It would have been not right. They would have actually felt the pain of that. They would have said, somebody needs to look for the boy. Somebody needs to look for the boy, but nobody does. We will ask ourselves the question, who should have gone to look for the younger brother? Who should have gone to look for the younger brother? Everyone in that story knows, in that culture knows, the older brother should have gone. Everybody knows that. It was not the patriarchs, the father. It wasn't the matriarch, the mother. It was the firstborn. It was his job. It was the law of primogeniture. It's found in Genesis 21, 15, 17. It talks about it. The younger brother gets 1/3. The older brother gets 2/3. Why? Oh, well, because the older brother is the favorite? No. I mean, I'm the favorite in our family. But that's not why. He gets 2/3 because he is given a responsibility as the older brother. It was his job to keep not only the family together, but the estate together. The security of the family was not in a bank account, it was in property and animals. The older brother was responsible to keep the family and the land together. If any one of the other family members were to go broke, facing slavery, it was the job of the older brother to rescue him. The older brother should have gone out to find the lost son. The other brother should have risked everything. That was his duty. The older brother should have gone out and found the lost son and brought him home. In the culture, everybody knew that. And everybody knew that the brother had failed. Because he wanted the father's things. He didn't want to have to divide his inheritance again. He didn't want to accept the responsibility that came with being the older brother. He didn't want to accept the cost of bringing home the lost son. You say, Troy, what's an older brother like? During the war in Vietnam, Lieutenant Daniel Dawson flew these small planes called the Bird Dog aircraft. These small planes were used in Renaissance planes to fly over the jungle and spot the enemy. Then the fighter jets would come in and attack. These planes were feared. They would hide, and when they flew over, but if they were spotted, they would attempt to shoot them down. On November 6, 1964, he was on a Renaissance mission, and his plane went down. A search was made, but nothing was found. That was in November of 64. March 12th, 1965, an edition of Life magazine tells the story of his brother. 25-year-old Donald Dawson. When Donald heard the report, he sold everything that he had. He bought a ticket to Vietnam, leaving his wife and 4 children with $20. He equipped himself with some soldier's gear and began wandering through enemy-controlled jungle looking for his brother. He carried leaflets, pictures of the plane and his brother. He offered an award. 100,000 Vietnamese, which was $1,370 for the safe return of his brother. 50,000 Vietnamese, $685 for the return of his body. He searched the jungles and the battlefields for the lost brother. He said that despite the danger, he was never hurt. Both sides heard of his dedication and responded to his request. He became known as the brother of the pilot. He spent 9 months in the jungle. 4 of those 9 months he was a prisoner. Someone told him his brother was dead. He gave him his brother's flight vest. And he said he would tend to his brother's grave till they could come get his body. And only then, when they released him to go home, his brother's body to go home, did his brother go home to his wife and 4 children. See, that's what an older brother would have done. He would have left the 99 for the 1. He would have left the 9 coins to find the 1. The older brother should have said, Father, I will go look for him, and I will bring him home. And if his inheritance is gone, as I expect it will be, I'll bring him back to the family at my expense. I will find my brother, and I will bring him home. And I don't care what it costs me. I'll divide my 2/3. The question is this, is who is the true older brother in this story? We're faced with a problem. Now the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus. This man welcomed sinners and eats with them. This is where the story is hard for us. Jesus is saying that the older brother in this parable is a Pharisee. He's religious. And what Jesus is saying, in the absence of the older brother, as I set the pattern and as I break the pattern, what everyone here needs to know is I'm the older brother. Jesus. See, by putting this flawed or broken older brother in the story, the audience would see the conflict as we're seeing it today. And they would leave them with this desire and this yearning for an older brother. Well, if I get lost, who's going to come look for me? Jesus was saying, I will. I'll come. He's saying, you won't rescue the younger brothers, but I will. You won't go to the pigsty, but I will. You won't bring them home, but I will. You won't go and snatch someone from the depths of addiction, but I will. You will not deal with someone's pain and trauma and anger and unforgiveness, but I will. You will not go to the depths of hell, but I will. See, Jesus is saying this flawed older brother is only in this story to turn your heart towards me, because I will pursue you. See, the true older brother, he left his throne in heaven. He set aside his inheritance in glory. He came to this earth. He came seeking the lost. He finds us in the pig pens when we smell like sin. Yes, we're filled with filth of our own selfishness, but he puts his arms around us and he says, come home. He picks us up. He brings us home. Hebrews 2:11 says this, but the one who makes people holy, Jesus, and those who are made holy, us, are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. See, he comes to the pigsty. He sees us. He feels the shame. He picks us up like the shepherd with the lost lamb, and he puts us on his shoulder. He searches the house like the lady, and he looks and he finds us. There's always a cost to rescuing the lost. See, forgiveness always comes at a cost to the one that offers the forgiveness. See, the younger brother, his forgiveness was free to him. He was given a ring, he was given a robe, he was given sandals, and he was given a celebration. It was free to him. The father could not reinstate him because all the expenses had been divided against the brothers. 1/3 of the money went to the younger brother, and 2/3 went to the older brother. And the truth of this story is the older brother was not going to let the younger brother back in. Way back to week 2, the true older brother is the one that absorbs our debt. He takes our debt on himself on the cross. There's no way for the Heavenly Father to bring us in except by the expense of the true older brother. See, on the cross, Jesus was punished so that you can be forgiven. Jesus was made sin with our sinfulness so that we may be made righteous with his righteousness. Jesus on the cross became a curse so that we could receive a blessing. Jesus was chastised or punished so that we might have peace. Jesus became poor with our poverty so that we become rich with his riches. Jesus was wounded so that we could be healed. Jesus died our death so that we could experience life. Jesus endured shame so that we might be set free. Jesus was stripped of his clothes and his dignity so we could be clothed in his dignity. Jesus was treated like an outcast so we could be brought into the family of God. That was the job of the older brother. You see, we ask ourselves the question, but why did he come to rescue us? See, there's going to be a day that each of us are going to cross over to the other side through death. And he died. Jesus died for us. He was the older brother so that when we cross over, that the Father can run to us, so the Father can embrace us, so the Father can fall on your neck, so the Father can welcome you into the family, so the Father can celebrate in heaven over us. See, the Father is waiting, and the Son is searching. Maybe you're here and you feel like the prodigal son. The son said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. See, the father needed the younger brother, the older brother. See, we think this story is about the Pharisees, or about the younger brother, or about the older brother, or about the father. But ultimately, all of those characters are meant to point us towards one. And that's the true older brother. Who we think is absent from the story. Who they would have recognized. Where's the older brother? But he's not absent. The story was told like this in 3 to create tension, to show, to point towards something that was missing. Everyone would have been waiting for the older brother to go find the younger brother. They would have been waiting for the older brother to step in, but he doesn't. This was meant to leave everyone hearing, have a yearning in their heart for an older brother, that when they're frustrated, or when they're lost, that I know that I have an older brother that will come and find me. That older brother is Jesus. He's the true older brother. You need to know today that the true older brother is pursuing you today. No matter where you are. If you're in a pig pen, or if you're in church. If your heart has wandered away, he's pursuing you. I think we need to realize that the true older brother has absorbed our debt. The father in the story needed the older brother. This would have left the listeners longing And the true older brother has absorbed my debt and yours. Number 3, the true older brother invites you back into the family. No matter how you've wandered away. Just come on. Come on home. Not as a slave, but as my son. Not as a slave, but as my daughter. And the older brother splits back the inheritance. That we don't have to earn our way back. Since you're part of the family. What is mine is yours. Think over this last year, think of Caleb and Joel and Bianca. Through this last year, they went through an adoption process. And Joel adopted Caleb. And I just went away with them for a couple of days, a week or so ago. I couldn't help but be struck by Joel's love for his son. And whenever the day comes where Joel passes from this earth, all of his inheritance, if I had Joel's money, I'd burn mine. He is loaded. But all of his inheritance go to his son. Won't be like, well, that's his family. The true older brother is not ashamed of you, even if you've brought shame to the father. The older brother is not ashamed of you. He's calling you. He's pursuing you. Number 5. You are not a fad. You are families. You remember fads? Mullets, acid wash jeans, fidget spinners. They would come and go. You know, you couldn't find a fidget spinner in Canada for like 6 months. And now you can't find them because nobody wants them. You are not a fad. You are not a fad. You are family. A fad comes and goes. It's here today and gone tomorrow. You are not a fad. The Father is not tired of you. He longs for a relationship with you. And He sent the older brother to make that happen. Proverbs 18:24 says this, anyone who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I don't know who you are today or where you are. Wherever you are in your journey of faith, if you find yourself in a pig pen, or you've tried to control the Father by your obedience, come home. The older brother is pursuing you. That longing in your heart to be found is why the true older brother was missing from the story. And that longing to be loved, to be forgiven, and to be given an inheritance and to be made right before God is for us today. So if you could bow your head. If you're here today and you say, Troy, I need to come home. I have wandered away. I'm either the older brother or I'm the younger brother, or I'm a Pharisee. I don't know, but I know that I need to come home so when my time comes to pass from this earth, that the Father will be there to accept me. And I need the younger brother to forgive me and bring me home today. If you're here and you have never made a decision, or it's been a long time and you found yourself wandering away, I'd encourage you today to just raise your hand and say, Troy, I need to come home. I need to come home to the Father. That I'm longing for that younger brother, that older brother in the story. I need a Savior. So we're going to do something just a little different in our last few moments. I'd ask the team to come just real quietly, get them to lead us in living hope. I would ask you today, as we've listened to God's Word, that even if you haven't wandered, or I would encourage you today to make a fresh commitment in your heart. Commitment that not only will you respond to the older brother, but that you will be a good older brother in this story. That if you know people in your family or your friends or people that used to come to church that have wandered away, that you would pray for them, that you would go to them. And encourage them to come home. But this morning I would like us, over the next just few moments, to just make a commitment in every heart to surrender ourselves to the Father. So why don't we stand together?